The first man who asked for the captive offered $2 million before Adrian Vale had even decided what to do with him. 10 minutes earlier, Adrian, the Alpha who controlled half the city's eastern docks, had stood over the quiet stranger in the basement of a burned-out warehouse and told his men not to kill him. It should have been an insignificant act of mercy. The captive had no weapon, no identification, and no name Adrian could verify. He had been found bound in a back room after Adrian's crew raided a rival safe house, sitting alone beneath a single hanging bulb while everyone else fled or died fighting. He hadn't begged when Adrian's gun touched his chest. He hadn't threatened him either. He had only lifted tired gray eyes and waited. That was why Adrian had lowered the weapon. "Keep him alive," he had said. Now Adrian's phone vibrated against his palm. His lieutenant, Mason, watched from across the warehouse office as Adrian read the message twice. $2 million. Cash. No questions. We want the quiet one alive. Adrian looked through the glass wall toward the captive sitting between two guards 20 feet away. The stranger's wrists were still cuffed. His dark hair hung over one eye. He looked less like someone worth starting a negotiation over and more like a man who had forgotten what sleep felt like. "Who sent it?" Adrian asked. "Rossi channel," Mason said. "Encrypted account we've seen before." That changed the room. The Rossis did not buy prisoners from Adrian Vale. They threatened, stole, bribed, or buried people. Offering money meant they wanted something badly enough to avoid a fight. Adrian stepped through the office door. The captive noticed him immediately, but his expression barely moved. That bothered Adrian more than panic would have. "What's your name?" Adrian asked. "Eli. Last name." A pause. "I don't use one." One of the guards gave a humorless laugh. Adrian didn't. "The Rossis just offered me $2 million for you." For the first time, Eli changed. Not much. His shoulders tightened by less than an inch, and his gaze dropped to Adrian's phone before returning to his face. But Adrian had spent 15 years surviving men who lied for a living. Tiny reactions were often louder than confessions. "You know them," Adrian said. "I know the name." "That wasn't what I asked." Eli looked toward the locked steel door at the end of the corridor. The movement was automatic, almost instinctive. "Checking the exit." Adrian noticed. "If they want me," Eli said quietly, "you should take the money." Mason's eyebrows rose. Adrian studied him. Most prisoners offered 2 million reasons not to be handed to an enemy. Eli had just volunteered. "Why?" "Because keeping me will cost more." It was the longest answer he had given all night. Adrian felt something cold settle behind his ribs. "Is that a warning?" "No," Eli looked back at him. "It's experience." The word landed harder than it should have. Adrian knew the look now. The stillness of someone who had learned that being noticed was usually followed by someone deciding what happened to him. Eli kept his hands folded despite the cuffs. He didn't ask for water, a lawyer, or freedom. He asked for nothing at all, as though needing anything created a debt someone could collect later. Adrian had seen that habit before in men who had survived prisons. He had never seen it in someone who looked barely 30. Mason's phone rang. He answered, listened, then slowly turned toward Adrian. "We have another problem." "What?" That Rossi message wasn't the first inquiry. Adrian's gaze hardened. "Explain." Mason held out the phone. A broker from the Western District had contacted one of their dock managers 40 minutes earlier. Different channel. Different faction. Same request. Male prisoner. Quiet. Dark hair. Gray eyes. Alive. And one detail the Rossi message had not included. A thin white scar behind the captive's right ear. Adrian crossed the corridor before Mason finished speaking. One guard stood as Adrian reached Eli. Adrian stopped inches away. "Turn your head." Eli went perfectly still. "Why?" "Turn your head." The captive hesitated, then slowly moved his hair aside. A pale line curved behind his right ear. Mason swore under his breath. Adrian felt the balance of the situation change. The Rossis could have learned Eli was here through a leak. But another faction had been searching for him before Adrian's raid, and they knew a mark no one in this warehouse had reported. "How long have people been looking for you?" Adrian asked. Eli let his hair fall back into place. Silence. "Eli." "Nothing." Adrian crouched so they were eye level. "Someone knew where to look before I knew you existed." Eli's jaw tightened. "Then stop looking. That's not how this works. It is if you want to live." The guard shifted. Adrian didn't. "Who erased your identity?" Eli's eyes snapped to his, and there it was again, That tiny involuntary break in the mask. Fear, but not of Adrian. Adrian stood. Move him upstairs. Private room. No one enters without my approval. Eli looked toward the locked door again. You're making it worse. For who? Adrian asked. Eli didn't answer. Mason's phone vibrated a third time. He looked at the screen, and whatever he saw drained the color from his face. Adrian. What now? Mason turned the phone around. No offer this time. No greeting. Just a photograph taken less than an hour ago, from outside the warehouse. Adrian's car was visible near the loading bay. So were two of his guards. Beneath the image was a single sentence. We know you spared him. Name your price before someone else does. By the time Adrian's men reached the street, whoever had taken the photograph was gone. What they left behind was worse. The camera mounted above the warehouse loading bay had been turned 12 degrees toward the wall, just enough to miss the position from which the picture had been taken. Someone had approached an armed mafia safe house, touched Adrian Vale's security system, photographed his car, and disappeared without triggering a single alarm. Mason came upstairs 20 minutes later carrying a tablet instead of an explanation. The camera wasn't hacked remotely, he said. Someone moved it by hand. Adrian stared at the frozen security feed. At 11:43, the camera showed the empty loading bay. At 11:44, the image jolted sideways. No face, no body, just a black-gloved hand entering from above the frame. One of ours, Adrian asked. Either that, or someone knew the blind spots better than we do. That was consequence number one. The captive had been in Adrian's possession for less than 3 hours, and already he had a possible leak inside his own security perimeter. Upstairs, Eli sat in a room with no restraints now, though the door remained locked and 2 guards stood outside it. Adrian had ordered the cuffs removed because there was nowhere Eli could run without passing armed men. When Adrian entered, Eli was standing beside the window, looking at the reflection in the glass instead of the city beyond it. They got close, Eli said. Adrian stopped. How would you know that? You moved me. That tells you nothing. You added guards. Your lieutenant checked the window before he left. And nobody brought my cuffs back. Eli finally turned. Something scared you. Adrian almost smiled. Almost. The quiet prisoner was observant enough to read an organization he had entered only hours ago. Someone touched one of my cameras. Eli's face didn't change this time. Then this place isn't safe. For you. For anyone standing near me. Before Adrian could answer, Mason opened the door without knocking. He held a thin folder. We ran improperly. Eli's attention shifted to it, and that reaction was sharper than anything Adrian had seen downstairs. Mason placed the folder on the table. Eli Mercer. That's the name attached to fingerprints taken at a private clinic in Baltimore 6 years ago. Adrian looked at Eli. You said you didn't use a last name. I don't. Apparently someone did. Mason opened the folder. Except Eli Mercer doesn't exist anymore. No tax record. No license. No address history. No school record. The clinic itself closed 5 years ago. Its patient archive was destroyed in a fire. Adrian watched Eli instead of the pages. Convenient. It gets better, Mason said. The fingerprint entry was accessed 3 times in the last 48 hours. By Rossi. No, Mason slid the tablet beside the folder. 3 access attempts. 3 routing points. None belonged to the Rossis. One originated through a legal office connected to a shipping consortium Adrian had done business with twice. Another passed through a private security company. The third had no identifiable owner. 3 different networks. 3 different interests. One quiet man. Eli stepped away from the table. Adrian noticed it immediately. You recognize one of them. No, you moved. You noticed too much. That keeps me alive. Eli gave him a tired look. It might get you killed this time. Adrian's phone rang before he could press further. It was Victor Hale, the manager overseeing Pier 9. Adrian answered. He heard shouting first. Then an alarm. Boss, somebody torched container 26. Adrian's expression hardened. What was inside? Nothing worth burning. That's the point. A message had been painted across the steel doors before the fire started. Victor sent the photograph. For words in white paint stood above the flames. Give back what was taken. Adrian looked at Eli. Pier 9 was hit. Eli went pale. Not startled. Pale. What did they write? Adrian showed him. Eli read the words once and closed his eyes. You know what that means. I know you should stop treating this like a ransom negotiation. The balance in the room shifted. Adrian stepped closer. Then tell me what I'm treating it like. Eli looked toward Mason, then the guards beyond the open doorway. Not with them here. Mason stiffened. Adrian studied Eli for several seconds. A few hours ago, the prisoner had possessed nothing, not even a verifiable surname. Now Adrian was considering dismissing his own men because the prisoner had information he needed. He hated that. He hated even more that Eli knew it. Adrian nodded once. Mason's jaw tightened, but he sent the guards away and followed them out. The door closed. For the first time, Adrian and Eli were alone. Talk, Adrian said. Eli remained standing. The people asking for me aren't working together. I figured that out. No, you figured out they're different organizations. Eli's voice stayed quiet. You haven't figured out that some of them hate each other more than they hate you. That was new. Adrian said nothing. If one group believes another has me, they'll move before they know why. If they think you're choosing a side by keeping me. Eli glanced at the burning container photograph. They'll force you to prove it. Why? Eli's mouth tightened. Because people get dangerous when they think someone else owns something they want. Something, not someone. Adrian heard the choice. And what exactly are you? Eli looked at him for a long moment. Someone you should have left in that room. A hard knock broke the silence. Mason entered again, this time without waiting for permission. His anger was gone. That worried Adrian. We found the source of the second inquiry. Who? That's the problem. There is no source. Mason placed a printed page on the table. The broker who contacted Pier 9 was paid through a shell company incorporated 11 years ago. We traced the directors. All dead. The address is an empty building. Every account connected to it was closed except one. Adrian scanned the page. Who owns the remaining account? Nobody, according to the bank. Eli was staring at the paper. Adrian caught the recognition instantly. You've seen that company before. Eli said nothing. Adrian reached for the page, but Eli moved first. His finger landed on a small emblem printed beside the company name. A circle crossed by 3 vertical lines. The color drained from his face. Eli. He pulled his hand away. You need to move everyone out of this building. Why? Now. Tell me what that symbol means. Eli looked toward the door, then at the ceiling camera, then back at Adrian. His controlled silence finally cracked. It means the people looking for me knew where you were going to take me before you did. Mason's phone buzzed. A security alert filled the screen. Adrian expected another photograph. Instead, it was a notification from the building's access system. Someone had just used a valid internal credential to unlock the service entrance downstairs. The credential belonged to Adrian himself. The service entrance opened for exactly 4 seconds before Adrian killed power to the entire building. Darkness swallowed the hallway, followed by the metallic slam of emergency locks dropping into place. Nobody moves, he ordered. Mason reached for his gun, but Eli caught Adrian's wrist before Adrian could do the same. It was the first time the captive had touched him. Don't send anyone downstairs. Adrian looked at the hand around his wrist. Eli released him immediately. Someone just used my credential, Adrian said. Which means they want you to think someone came in. A dull click sounded somewhere below them. Not a gunshot. Smaller. Mechanical. Eli's head turned toward the floor. Kill the radios. Mason stared at him. What? Turn them off. Adrian had no reason to trust him. Then one of the guards outside shouted. His radio began emitting a high electronic whine. Every radio in the corridor answered at once. Off. Adrian snapped. Mason ripped his earpiece free and killed his handset. The others followed. The sound stopped. 5 seconds later, Adrian's phone displayed 3 simultaneous alerts. Loading bay breach, stairwell breach, roof access breach. Mason looked between them. 3 teams. No, Eli said. No teams. Adrian's eyes narrowed. How do you know? Eli moved toward the dark window and stayed away from the glass. Because if they wanted inside, they wouldn't announce every entrance at once. Another alarm appeared. Then another. The building's security system was drowning itself in warnings. Eli pointed toward Mason's tablet. They're making you choose where to send your men. Adrian understood a second before Mason did. They want the floors emptied. Eli nodded toward the locked room behind them. They want me moved. That changed the threat completely. Whoever had Adrian's credential was not trying to break through his defenses. They were controlling his response to them. Adrian opened the secure internal channel on his phone. All units hold position. Nobody changes floors. Nobody opens an exterior door. Visual confirmation only. Mason glanced at Eli. The order had come from Adrian, but the strategy had come from the prisoner. 30 seconds passed. Then a guard on the second floor reported something beneath the service door. An envelope. No footsteps. No intruder. Just a white envelope pushed through the gap. Adrian went down himself, with Mason beside him and Eli behind them. 2 hours earlier, Eli would have been surrounded by guards. Now Adrian had deliberately kept him close because the man had recognized a pattern none of his people had seen. It irritated him. It also kept everyone alive. The envelope contained a blank hotel keycard and a strip of paper bearing the same circle crossed by 3 lines. On the reverse was a sequence of 12 numbers. Eli stopped breathing for a beat. "You know the numbers," Adrian said. Eli crouched beside the envelope without touching it. "They're not numbers." "Then what are they?" "Coordinates written without separators." Mason entered them into an offline map. The location appeared less than 4 miles away, an abandoned municipal records annex near the river. Adrian looked at Eli. "Why send me there?" "They didn't." Eli pointed at the first 6 digits. "Change the split." Mason did. The location jumped across the city to Pier 9, the container that had burned less than an hour earlier. Adrian's jaw tightened. "A demonstration." "A test," Eli corrected. "They wanted to know whether I was here to read it." Silence settled over the stairwell. The message had never been intended for Adrian. He was only the delivery system. "How do you know their code?" Adrian asked. Eli stood. "Because I've seen it before." "Where?" "On doors." Adrian waited. "What doors?" Eli looked at the symbol again. "Places people disappeared from." That answer should have made Adrian lock him back upstairs and force the rest out of him. Instead, he handed Eli the keycard. "Show me what I'm missing." Mason turned sharply. "Boss." He recognized the radio diversion. He recognized the coordinates. Whoever is doing this expects him to understand their messages. Adrian kept his eyes on Eli. "So for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to assume he wants to survive more than he wants to lie to me." It was not trust, but it was the first thing close to it. Eli seemed to understand the difference. He took the card by its edges and held it toward the emergency light. A faint pattern appeared beneath the plastic coating. 3 vertical lines, a circle, and a tiny stamped number, 417. Eli's expression changed. "What?" Adrian asked. "That number belonged to a room." "Where?" "I don't know the name of the place." "You were there?" Eli hesitated, then nodded. "Years ago." Mason stepped closer. "What happened in room 417? "Nothing to me." Eli's voice went flatter. "That was the point. I learned not to ask what happened to the people who went inside." Adrian watched the old survival habit return. Smaller voice, lowered eyes, fewer words. Becoming unimportant on purpose. "And the company from the shell account?" Adrian asked. "Was it connected?" "I never heard a company name." Eli turned the card over. Only the symbol. A vibration came from Mason's tablet. This time it wasn't another alarm. One of Adrian's men had restored an isolated camera feed from the alley behind the building. The footage showed a hooded figure approaching the service entrance 12 minutes earlier. The figure never touched the keypad. Instead, he placed a small device against the metal frame, waited 4 seconds, then walked away. Mason froze the image. "So nobody stole your credential?" he said. "They cloned it." Adrian stared at the device in the stranger's hand. "From where?" Mason pulled the access log. Adrian's credential had last been used before tonight at a private parking garage 3 days earlier. Only 6 people had been close enough to his key fob to scan it. All 6 worked for him. The leak was no longer theoretical. But Eli was staring at something else in the frozen image. Zoom in on his left hand. Mason enlarged it. The hooded figure wore a black glove, but one finger was exposed. Around it was a narrow silver ring marked with 3 vertical cuts. Eli stepped back. "I know that ring." Adrian turned to him. "Whose is it?" "I don't know his name." "You recognize the man." "I recognize what he is." Eli looked at the frozen image as if the years between them had disappeared. "He's a collector." Mason frowned. "For the people who erased you?" Eli shook his head. "No. The people who erased me were hiding me from men like him." The discovery rearranged everything. The missing records. The burned clinic. The dead shell company directors. Someone had not erased Eli to make him easier to exploit. Someone had erased him because being found was dangerous. Adrian looked at the quiet man differently now. Not innocent. Not guilty. Protected. "How long have they been looking for you?" Eli's answer came almost too softly to hear. At least 6 years. Mason's tablet chimed again. A recovered file had appeared inside the cloned access data, a file the intruder had deliberately left behind. It contained one photograph. Eli, 6 years younger, leaving the Baltimore clinic. Beside him stood a woman Adrian had never seen. Her face had been violently scratched out of the image. Underneath were 2 timestamps. The first was 6 years old. The second was from 47 minutes before Adrian's raid tonight. Adrian read the line beneath them twice. Subject reacquired. Do not terminate. Eli stared at the photograph, all color leaving his face. Adrian felt the question change again. These people had not started hunting Eli because Adrian captured him. They had known exactly where he was before Adrian ever entered that warehouse, and someone had been watching him long enough to know when he would be taken. The first real cost of keeping Eli arrived before dawn. Adrian was still staring at the 6-year-old photograph when Mason's phone rang, and this time no one in the room mistook the call for another warning. Victor Hale was shouting over sirens at Pier 9. They hit the bonded warehouse, he said. Not the empty container. The actual warehouse. Adrian's expression hardened. Losses. 2 men injured. 1 truck gone. Customs files burned. And the Port Authority just froze our morning clearance because somebody sent them evidence tying the shipment to contraband. Mason swore. Pier 9 was one of Adrian's cleanest operations. Losing 1 night of movement would cost hundreds of thousands. Losing the customs relationship could cost millions. They didn't steal anything valuable, Victor added. They wanted the pier shut down. Adrian looked at Eli. Because I didn't name a price. Eli's eyes lowered. I told you keeping me would cost more. You also told me the people hunting you weren't working together. They aren't. Then which one just burned my business? Eli looked at the photograph on Mason's tablet. The scratched-out woman, the collector's ring, the words subject reacquired. I don't know. Adrian hated the answer because he believed it. 10 minutes later, another consequence arrived. A trusted shipping partner canceled 2 routes without explanation. Then a third call came from one of Adrian's accountants. A bank had placed a temporary compliance hold on an account used to pay Doc Cruz. 3 attacks, none of them aimed directly at Eli. They were squeezing Adrian instead. Not to kill him. To make keeping the captive economically and politically painful. Mason shut the office door. We need to move him. We tried moving him once, Adrian said. They knew before we did. Then we hand him over. The room went still. Eli did not react, which somehow made Mason's words worse. To whom? Adrian asked. Rossi offered 2 million. And the others? We don't even know who the others are. Mason lowered his voice. That's exactly the problem. Since he came here, Pier 9 has been hit. Our access system was compromised. 1 account is frozen, and somebody proved they can get within 10 feet of this building. Your people are asking why we're risking everything for a stranger. There it was. The threat had crossed the walls. Adrian's enemies no longer needed to enter his organization. They only needed to make his own men question his decision. Nobody touches him, Adrian said. Mason's jaw tightened. I'm not suggesting we kill him. I wasn't talking about you. Adrian saw the flicker in Mason's face. That answer meant Adrian already suspected someone inside might act without permission. Eli understood it too. His gaze shifted toward the closed door. Adrian turned to him. You stay with me until I know who has access to our movements. Eli gave a quiet, humorless breath. That sounds a lot like another locked room. It sounds like you staying alive. Those aren't always different things. Adrian almost answered, then stopped. The line landed somewhere he didn't want it to. Instead, he picked up the photograph. Who was the woman? Eli looked at the scratched-out face. I don't know. You were walking beside her. I know. 6 years ago. I know. Adrian's patience thinned. Then give me something. Eli stared at the image for several seconds. She called herself Mara. I don't know if it was real. She took me out of the clinic the night before it burned. That was the first piece of the past Eli had offered without being cornered into it. Adrian said nothing, letting him continue. She told me never to use the same surname twice. Never stay anywhere that required fingerprints. Never answer anyone who used the 3-line symbol. Why? She wouldn't tell me. And you trusted her? Eli's eyes stayed on the damaged photograph. She got me out. That isn't an answer. For people like me, sometimes it is. Adrian understood the wound beneath the sentence before Eli could hide it. Survival first. Questions later. Gratitude is debt. Protection as something another person could eventually collect. Mason's phone buzzed again. He checked it and frowned. The Rossis withdrew their offer. Adrian looked over. Why? They replaced it. Mason turned the screen toward him. The original $2 million proposal was gone. The new message contained no amount. Instead, it listed 3 locations Adrian owned, including a restaurant where his younger crews met, and a warehouse containing legitimate payroll records. Beneath them, give him TOUS by sunrise, or we keep collecting. Eli read it over Adrian's shoulder. That's not the same language. What? Adrian asked. Eli pointed to the screen. The first offer said they wanted me alive. This says give me to them. Different priority. Meaning, maybe the first people wanted me. These people want to make sure nobody else gets me. Adrian looked back at the scratched photograph. Multiple factions. Different objectives. One group had erased Eli. Another had spent 6 years hunting him. A third was now dismantling Adrian's operations to force possession. The mystery was narrowing, but every answer made the situation worse. Mason's phone rang yet again. He answered, listened, then walked to the window. We've got movement outside the restaurant on Mercer Street. 2 vehicles. No plates. Adrian was already reaching for his coat. Evacuated. Already happening. Eli stood. Don't go there. Adrian turned. Why? Because they gave you 3 locations. They threatened 3 locations. No. Eli stepped closer to the screen. They gave you choices. His finger moved between the addresses. Pier 9 taught them you respond to property. Now they're watching which place you protect first. Adrian stopped. That was exactly the kind of pattern Eli had recognized downstairs. They're mapping my priorities. Eli nodded. And your response routes. Adrian changed the order immediately. No convoy. Clear all 3 locations remotely. Nobody leaves this building in a marked vehicle. Mason related. For the second time that night, Adrian had changed operational decisions because of Eli. The balance between them shifted another fraction. Eli was still under Adrian's control, but Adrian was beginning to depend on him. 20 minutes later, confirmation came. The 2 vehicles outside Mercer Street drove away without firing a shot. Eli had been right. It had been surveillance, not an attack. Then one of Adrian's analysts called with something better. They had recovered metadata from the photograph of Eli leaving the Baltimore clinic. The image had not been taken by the collector. It had been copied from an old municipal evidence server. The original uploader had left a buried identifier. Mason put the name on the screen. Mara Voss. Eli went completely still. She took the photograph? Adrian asked. She couldn't have. Why? Because she was standing beside me. The room changed again. Mason opened the metadata tree. Mara had not uploaded only 1 photograph. There were 43 archived files attached to the same identifier, all sealed under a dead investigation number. Adrian opened the first. A list of names appeared. Most had been crossed out. Beside several were dates. Beside others was the same 3-line symbol. Eli's name was near the bottom, but unlike the rest, it had been marked with 1 word, protected. Adrian felt the truth finally moving within reach. Mara wasn't hiding herself, he said. She was hiding you. Eli stared at the screen. Then why keep a file? Mason opened the next document. It was a scan letter dated 2 days before the Baltimore clinic burned. Most of the text had been corrupted, but 1 sentence remained intact. If they discover what Eli can verify, they will never stop looking for him. Adrian read it twice. Verify what? Eli whispered. Before either man could answer, Mason opened the final surviving attachment. It contained no explanation, only a photograph of 8 men standing around a conference table 6 years earlier. Adrian recognized 3 immediately. One was a dead judge. One had once controlled the Western Docks. The third was Carlo Rossi, current head of the family, offering threats for Eli's return. But Eli wasn't looking at any of them. He was staring at the man standing in the center, his face drained of color. Adrian followed his gaze. You know him? Eli took 1 step back. I thought he was dead. Adrian looked at the caption beneath the photograph. The meeting had taken place inside the Baltimore clinic 3 days before it burned. And beside the man Eli recognized was a handwritten note from Mara. If he finds Eli first, do not let him call it a rescue. The man Eli thought was dead had not been hunting him. He had been trying to get him back. Adrian discovered it less than 12 minutes after Mara's warning appeared on the screen. Mason ran the name beneath the photograph through every private database they still trusted. Elias Vane, former federal investigator, declared dead 6 years ago after the Baltimore clinic fire. No body recovered. No confirmed sighting since. Then Mason found a video buried inside one of Mara's sealed evidence files. Grainy security footage showed Vane dragging Eli through a service corridor while smoke rolled across the ceiling. Eli was younger, bleeding from the temple, barely conscious. Vane wasn't forcing him deeper inside. He was carrying him toward an exit. "Stop," Eli said. Mason paused the footage. Vane's face was turned toward the camera, one arm around Eli's waist while the other fired at someone behind them. "He got me out," Eli whispered. Adrian looked at Mara's note again. "If he finds Eli first, do not let him call it a rescue." 4 parts. Every clue had pointed toward men who wanted Eli for what he knew. Now the evidence contradicted itself. Maybe Mara didn't trust him, Mason said. Maybe she had reason not to. Adrian kept watching Eli. Or maybe we've been using the word enemy too easily. Eli said nothing, but the silence was different now. Not concealment. Shock. Mason opened another file. This one contained transaction records from the week before the clinic burned. Vane had transferred money into 3 accounts tied to safe houses later used to hide survivors. One payment went to Mara herself. Another went to the clinic technician who had erased Eli's fingerprints. "He funded the people who hid you," Adrian said. Eli stared at the screen. "Then why did Mara warn me about him?" "Because helping you escape once doesn't mean he wanted the same thing she wanted." That answer proved itself almost immediately. Adrian's secure line rang. The caller ID displayed no number. Mason moved to trace it, but Adrian answered first. "Vale." A man's voice came through, low and tired. "If Eli is standing near you, tell him I still remember the blue stairwell." Eli froze. Adrian put the call on speaker. "Who is this?" "You already found my name." "Vane." "Alive." "You burned my peer?" Adrian asked. "No, you cloned my credential?" "No, then why are you asking for him?" A pause. "Because the people attacking you are not trying to recover Eli. They're trying to force him into motion." Adrian's gaze sharpened. "For what?" "To see who comes for him." Eli stepped closer despite himself. "Elias." The voice on the line broke for half a second. "You're alive." Eli's hand tightened around the edge of the table. "Mara said not to trust you." Mara was right. That answer changed the room more than a denial would have. Vane continued before anyone could speak. "She didn't trust what I was willing to do to keep you alive." Adrian watched Eli absorb that. Meaning I would have locked him somewhere no one could reach, and called it protection." Eli looked away. Vane's next words were directed at Adrian. "Sound familiar?" Adrian's jaw tightened. Mason stopped moving entirely. There it was, the twist none of them wanted. Vane might not be the monster hunting Eli. He might be the version of a protector Adrian was already becoming. "Why does everyone want him?" Adrian asked. "Not everyone wants the same thing. I know that." "No. You know they belong to different factions. You still think Eli is the prize." Vane exhaled. "He isn't. What he can verify is." The phrase from Mara's letter came back instantly. "If they discover what Eli can verify, they will never stop looking for him." Adrian leaned toward the speaker. "Verify what?" "A meeting that officially never happened. 8 men. 6 years ago. Judges, port owners, syndicate heads, law enforcement. They built a shared laundering network through medical charities and private clinics. The Baltimore facility was one node." Mason looked at the photograph from Part 4. 8 men around the table. Carlo Rossi among them. "Why Eli?" Adrian asked. Vane hesitated. "Because he didn't just see them." Eli's face tightened. "Don't." Adrian turned toward him. "You remember?" "Pieces." "Eli." "I said don't." Vane's voice hardened. He was used to authenticate records. Voice confirmations, biometric access, sealed transfers. He was never supposed to understand what he was confirming. Eli stepped back from the phone like it had become dangerous. Adrian suddenly understood why erased fingerprints mattered. Why the clinic burned. Why one faction might want Eli dead while another wanted him hidden. Eli wasn't carrying a secret document. He was living evidence that certain records were real. And the people trying to recover him? Adrian asked. Some want him to testify. Some want him hidden forever. Some want him before anyone else can decide. And you? I want him somewhere no one can use him. Eli laughed once, without humor. There it is. Vane went quiet. Eli, a safer cage is still a cage. Adrian looked at him. The sentence was meant for Vane, but it hit both men. "Where are you?" Adrian asked. "Close enough to know you moved him upstairs after Pier 9. Mason reached for the trace. "Don't bother," Vane said. "I called because you need to understand one thing before sunrise. Rossi is not your biggest problem." Adrian looked at the clock. Less than an hour until sunrise. "Who is?" The people who erased Eli were not hiding him only from criminals. They were hiding him from the government task force that was supposed to protect witnesses. Mason stopped typing. "Why?" "Because the task force was compromised." Eli's eyes closed. That explained the dead investigation number, the sealed evidence, the erased identity. Even rescue itself had been dangerous. Adrian had spent the night asking which enemy wanted Eli. The better question was whether any institution touching him could be trusted at all. "What do you want me to do?" Adrian asked. "Ask Eli." Adrian frowned. "What?" "That's the part Mara understood before I did. Stop asking what everyone else wants to do with him." Vane's voice softened. "Ask him what he wants." The call ended. No trace. No location. Just silence. Adrian turned toward Eli, and for the first time since the warehouse, he did not issue an order. "What do you want?" Eli looked almost more frightened by the question than he had been by the guns. He opened his mouth, but Mason's tablet chimed before he could answer. A live feed appeared from the street outside. 3 black SUVs had stopped across from the building. Not Rossi vehicles. Government plates. Men in tactical jackets stepped out carrying a federal warrant. Mason read the name at the top and went pale. "They're here for Eli." Adrian looked at the seal. Same task force Vane had just called compromised. Downstairs, someone began pounding on the front door and announcing federal authority. Eli stared at Adrian. The question was no longer who wanted him. The question was whether Adrian would hand him to men carrying badges, or believe a fugitive who had just admitted that his idea of protection was another cage. The federal warrant changed Adrian's problem in less than 30 seconds. Until now, keeping Eli had cost him money, territory, and trust inside his organization. Refusing armed federal agents could cost him everything. "They're requesting entry," Mason said, watching the security feed. 6 agents had spread across the front entrance while 2 more moved toward the alley. They weren't repeating the tactics from earlier. No hidden cameras. No anonymous threats. They had adapted. Now they were using authority Adrian couldn't shoot without starting a war he could never contain. Adrian looked at Eli. "You asked me what I wanted," Eli said. "I'm answering now. I'm not going with them." "Then you're not going." Adrian turned to Mason. "Get him downstairs through the internal stairwell." Eli didn't move. "Where?" "A secondary exit. And then, I have another safe house." Eli's expression closed. "Another locked room. A secure location." That's what Vane called it too. The pounding downstairs grew louder. Adrian stepped closer. "This isn't the time. That's always what people say before they decide for me." The words stopped Adrian more effectively than a weapon. Outside, an agent raised the warrant toward the camera. Inside, Adrian realized the choice he had just made for Eli sounded exactly like protection and exactly like control. "Fine," he said. "Where do you want to go?" Eli glanced at the live feed. "Somewhere they don't expect you to take me. That eliminates every property I own." "Good." Mason looked between them. "We have maybe 4 minutes before they stop asking." Eli pointed to the service map on the wall. "The old freight tunnel under Pier 7. Does it still connect to the drainage corridor?" Adrian's eyes narrowed. "How do you know about that?" "I saw the original municipal plans years ago. At the clinic? In records I authenticated." New information. Eli had not simply witnessed names and faces. He remembered pieces of the network's infrastructure. "Where does the tunnel exit?" Adrian asked. 3 blocks south of the river station. Mason shook his head. That tunnel was sealed. On city records, Eli said. The physical gate was never filled. Adrian made the decision. "We use it." Mason caught his arm before he turned. "You're trusting him with your escape route?" "No," Adrian said. "I'm trusting him to know what happens if he's wrong." Eli heard the distinction. It wasn't warmth, but it was more power than Adrian had given him before. They were halfway down the internal stairs when the building shook with a heavy impact. The agents had breached the front door. Adrian's men did not fire. That order mattered. Gunfire would make escape impossible. Instead, they delayed, blocked corridors, demanded paperwork, and bought seconds. At the basement level, Mason unlocked a steel utility door. Eli stopped when he saw it. Adrian almost pushed him forward, then caught himself. Another door. Another man deciding where Eli went. Your call, Adrian said. Eli looked at him, surprised. Then he opened it himself. The tunnel smelled of wet concrete and rust. They moved fast. No one spoke until the noise from the building faded behind them. After 200 yards, Eli suddenly grabbed Adrian's sleeve. Stop. Mason raised his weapon. What? Eli crouched beside a cable running along the wall. It looked old except for one clean plastic junction box. That wasn't here on the original plans. Adrian examined it without touching it. A tiny green light blinked once. Tracker. Motion sensor, Mason said. Eli shook his head. Counter. He pointed to a narrow lens aimed across the passage. It records how many people pass. Adrian looked back toward the safe house. The task force had forced them underground, and someone else was already counting exits. The antagonistic force had adapted again. Can you disable it? Adrian asked. Eli studied the box. Yes, but if it stops reporting, they'll know we found it. Then don't disable it. Eli looked at him. What? Adrian took Mason's spare coat, wrapped it around a loose pipe, and moved it through the sensor twice. Give them the wrong number. For the first time that night, Eli almost smiled. They continued south. At the tunnel junction, Eli chose the route without waiting for Adrian's permission. Adrian followed. That was new too. When they emerged inside an abandoned maintenance garage near the river, Mason received the first update from the safe house. The federal team had reached Eli's room. They had found nothing, but they had taken every computer, every paper connected to Eli, and 2 of Adrian's men into custody. They're not just recovering him anymore, Mason said. They're cleaning the trail. Eli stared toward the gray light appearing beyond the garage doors. Because Vane contacted us. Adrian turned. You think they know? They came 10 minutes after he called. Maybe they were already moving. Maybe they weren't. Eli rubbed the faint scar behind his ear. Either way, staying hidden won't fix this. Adrian waited. Eli's voice was steadier when he continued. Mara erased me because she thought disappearing would keep me alive. It did. For 6 years. Now everyone knows I'm alive again. So what do you want? Adrian asked. Eli looked directly at him. I want to know what I can verify before someone kills everyone who can tell me. That was the new objective. Not escape. Not another hiding place. The truth. Mason's phone buzzed. One of his contacts had recovered part of the seized Baltimore investigation before the federal team locked the server. A single encrypted index remained accessible. 8 names from the conference photograph. Beside each was a reference number. Eli's identifier appeared beneath them all. You're the common authentication record, Mason said. If we recover the underlying files, you may be able to prove the entire network existed. Adrian looked at Eli. Where are the files? Eli studied the reference numbers. Mara would never keep them in one place. Then his eyes stopped on a prefix repeated 3 times. But I know where one archive might be. Where? Baltimore. Adrian's expression hardened. The burned clinic? Under it. There was a records vault below the imaging wing. Mason stared at him. You want to go back to the place everyone has spent 6 years watching? No, Eli said. I need to go back. Adrian immediately shook his head. Too exposed. Eli's face changed. The fragile cooperation between them disappeared. You asked what I wanted. I asked. I didn't promise to let you walk into a trap. Then you didn't ask. You gave me permission to agree with you. Adrian felt the accusation land because it was true. I'm trying to keep you alive. So was Mara. So was Vane. Eli stepped closer, no longer making himself small. Everyone who protects me eventually reaches the same point. They learn I matter. Then they decide that gives them the right to choose for me. Adrian said nothing. You want to know why I stay quiet? Eli continued. Because the moment people learn what I know, I stop being a person in the room. I become evidence. Leverage. A problem to move somewhere safe. His voice never rose. It didn't need to. I learned a long time ago that the less useful I looked, the fewer choices people took away from me. There it was, the truth behind 6 years of silence. Adrian could have ordered him into a car. He could have surrounded him with guards and called it protection. Instead, he reached into his coat, removed the key to the unmarked sedan parked inside the garage, and placed it on the table between them. Baltimore, Adrian said. But you tell me what you remember before we walk into that vault. Eli looked at the key. Trust didn't return, but the shape of the conflict changed. He picked it up himself. Then Mason's phone rang. His face tightened as he listened. We have another problem. Adrian almost laughed. Of course we do. Mason put the call on speaker. Victor's voice came through. Boss, someone just delivered a package to Pier 9. What package? A body. Eli went still. Whose? Victor hesitated. The man from the security footage. The collector. Adrian and Eli exchanged a look. The hunter who had tracked Eli to the safe house was dead. There's a note, Victor said. It says, Baltimore is closed. Eli's grip tightened around the car key. Victor continued, quieter now. And there's a photograph taped to the body. It was taken this morning. Of what? Adrian asked. The clinic ruins. A pause. They're already waiting for you there. The photograph of the Baltimore clinic had been taken from inside Adrian's own car. Mason proved it 30 seconds later. The angle was too low for a street camera, and the lower corner caught a reflection from the sedan's cracked passenger mirror. Someone had reached the maintenance garage before them, found the vehicle Adrian had just offered Eli, photographed the clinic ruins through its navigation display, and delivered the image with the collector's body. Then Adrian's phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Come to Baltimore with Eli. Bring no files. Your 2 men walk free. Mason looked at him. The agents took 2 of ours less than an hour ago. Adrian read the message again, which means whoever sent this can reach inside the task force. The threat was no longer a theory. The compromised authorities, the people attacking Adrian's business, and the network that wanted Eli were connected closely enough to trade human lives. Eli took the phone. A second message arrived while he held it. This one contained a live photograph of Adrian's detained men sitting on the floor of a concrete room, wrists bound. Behind them stood a federal agent whose face Mason recognized from the warrant team. They're not waiting at the clinic to kill us, Eli said. They want me to open something. Adrian looked at him. Then we don't go. Eli handed the phone back. They knew you'd say that. The third message proved it. A map appeared with red markers over Pier 9, Mercer Street, and 4 other businesses connected to Adrian. A countdown beneath them started at 58 minutes. 1 location for every 10 minutes you keep him. Mason went pale. They're forcing movement. No, Eli said. They're forcing a choice. Adrian ordered evacuations immediately, but the damage began before the first crews were clear. Pier 9 lost power. A refrigeration facility on the south side had its fire suppression system remotely triggered, destroying inventory without killing anyone. Then one of Adrian's oldest business partners called and severed ties. Someone had sent him bank records, photographs, and enough fabricated evidence to make staying loyal look suicidal. The enemy had stopped attacking buildings. Now they were dismantling Adrian's ability to protect anyone. Mason stared at the countdown. We can't absorb this for an hour. Adrian knew. Eli knew he knew. That was the worst part. Baltimore, Eli said. We go. No. Your people are paying for a decision I made. They're paying because someone wants to control you. And you're going to stop them by controlling me harder? Adrian's expression changed. Eli had found the wound between them and pressed directly into it. If I take you there, I'm delivering exactly what they want. Then don't deliver me. Help me get to the vault first. Mason interrupted. Assuming the vault still exists. Eli looked at the repeated archive prefixes on his screen. It exists. How can you know? Because the numbers aren't file locations. He pulled up the old index. I remembered this wrong. His finger moved across the references. Their authorization sequences. Adrian stepped closer. For what? The clinic used biometric verification for sealed transfers. I thought I was authenticating medical records. Eli swallowed. I wasn't. I was confirming transfers through the laundering network. The open loop that had followed them since Mara's letter finally tightened around a concrete answer. Eli could verify that the records were authentic because his biometrics had been used to authenticate them in the first place. That was why killing him had never been everyone's goal. Alive, he could validate the network. Controlled, he could validate only what his captor wanted. The vault isn't valuable without you, Mason said. Eli shook his head. Worse, I may be the key that decrypts it. Adrian's phone rang. Rossi. This time Adrian answered. Carlo Rossi didn't bother with greetings. Bring Mercer to Baltimore, and this ends. You've been trying to force him there all night. I've been trying to keep him away from Vane. Adrian glanced at Eli. Why? Rossi laughed softly. Because Vane wants testimony. The task force wants the archive destroyed. I want insurance. Everybody has a noble reason when the evidence belongs to someone else. And Eli, Adrian asked. What does he want? Silence. Rossi clearly hadn't expected the question. Then, since when does that matter? The call ended. Eli stared at Adrian. That one sentence did more damage than any threat. Since when does that matter? It was the logic behind every locked room in Eli's life. Mason's tablet chimed. He had finally decrypted another section of Mara's index. 8 names appeared again, but now each had a status. 5 were dead. Rossi was active. 1 former task force director was active. The final name was Elias Vane. Beside his name was a notation. Witness Recovery Authority revoked. Reason: unauthorized removal of subject EM. Eli's face tightened. He took me without permission. To save you, Mason said. Maybe, Eli replied. Or because he wanted control before they did. Adrian looked at the record. Vane had rescued Eli from the clinic, funded the people who erased him, and then spent years trying to recover him. Protector and captor were no longer opposites. They were competing claims on the same person. Then Mason found the last surviving note from Mara. It was only 2 lines. Eli must never be compelled to authenticate. If he chooses to verify the archive himself, the original record will become public and cannot be recalled. Adrian understood immediately. That's why everyone needs you alive. Eli nodded slowly. And why they can't just open it themselves. The factual mystery was almost complete. The archive contained proof. Eli could authenticate it. Once he did, the evidence would escape everyone's control. The remaining question was who would control Eli before he made that choice. The countdown reached 32 minutes. Adrian's secure line rang again, but this time the caller was Vane. Don't take him to the clinic, Vane said. They'll make him authenticate. And what would you do? Adrian asked. Take him somewhere they can never reach him. Eli closed his eyes. Adrian's jaw tightened. You still don't hear yourself. Vane went silent. If that archive goes public, he finally said, Eli will never have a normal life. Every surviving faction will hunt him. Every prosecutor will want him. Every criminal connected to those records will want him buried. So your solution is to bury him first? Adrian asked. My solution is to keep him breathing. Eli stepped toward the phone. Without asking me. Vane's voice softened. You don't understand what they'll do to you. I understand exactly what everyone does when they're afraid of losing me. Eli ended the call himself. That was new. No silence. No retreat. He had chosen to end the conversation. Then gunfire cracked outside the garage. Mason dropped behind the concrete barrier and drew his weapon. Adrian pulled Eli down as rounds shattered the upper windows. A black SUV smashed through the garage door. Men in tactical gear poured out. Not federal agents this time, but one wore the 3-line ring. The factions had stopped waiting. Adrian's men returned fire from the rear entrance. Mason shouted that the south exit was blocked. Adrian dragged Eli behind an engine block as bullets punched through sheet metal. There's another way out, Eli said. Where? Storm channel beneath the inspection pit. Adrian looked toward the pit 20 feet away across open ground. You'll never make it. Eli met his eyes. Then cover me. Not protect me. Cover me. Adrian understood the difference. He fired toward the shooters while Eli ran. Mason followed. Eli reached the pit, ripped up the rusted access grate, and found the channel exactly where he remembered it. Minutes later, they emerged 2 blocks away, soaked and breathing hard. Adrian's phone was still working. A final message waited on the screen. The photograph showed the clinic vault door. Beside it stood one of Adrian's captured men with a gun against his head. The message beneath it contained no countdown now. Bring Eli to the vault. He authenticates the archive for US. Your people live. Your businesses stop burning. And Vale keeps his empire. Eli read it over Adrian's shoulder. Adrian could end the attacks. Save his men. Preserve everything he had built. All he had to do was use the one person beside him as leverage before someone else did. Eli looked at him, and Adrian saw the old fear return. Not fear that Adrian would kill him, but fear that now Adrian finally knew exactly what he was worth. Adrian reached for his phone. Eli stepped back. For the first time since the warehouse, he looked at Adrian exactly the way he had looked at every locked door. And Adrian realized his next decision would answer the only question that mattered anymore. Whether he had been protecting Eli all night, or simply becoming the next man who owned him. Adrian made the decision before Eli could retreat another step. He took the keys to the unmarked sedan from Mason, placed them in Eli's hand, then closed Eli's fingers around them. "You're not my trade." Eli stared at him. Adrian unlocked his phone and deleted the message offering his empire in exchange for Eli's cooperation. "If you want to disappear, take the car. Mason will give you cash and a clean route west. I won't follow you." Mason's head snapped toward him. "Adrian, if you want the archive," Adrian continued, looking only at Eli, "I'll get you to the vault. But nobody puts your hand on that system unless you choose it. Not Rossi. Not Vane. Not the task force. Not me." For several seconds, Eli said nothing. The city was waking around them, traffic beginning somewhere beyond the storm channel, while everything Adrian had spent years controlling slipped further beyond his reach. "Your men will die," Eli said. "Maybe. Your businesses can be rebuilt. You could lose everything." Adrian glanced at the keys in Eli's hand. "That still doesn't make you mine." Something in Eli's face broke, not into relief, but disbelief. Adrian stepped away from him, deliberately leaving the path to the street open. "Choose." Eli looked toward the road. Freedom was 20 feet away. No cuffs. No locked door. No guards blocking him. Then he looked back at Adrian. "Take me to Baltimore." "You're sure?" "No." Eli tightened his hand around the keys. "That's why it's a choice." 40 minutes later, they entered the clinic ruins through an old drainage line Eli remembered from 6 years earlier. Adrian had refused the front entrance and refused Rossi's demand to come unarmed. But he also refused to bring an army. Mason stayed above with a small team and one instruction. If Eli said stop, they stopped. Beneath the burned imaging wing, Eli found the vault behind a warped steel fire door. Someone had restored power. White fluorescent lights flickered across the underground corridor. Adrian's captured men were kneeling near the vault, alive. Carlo Rossi stood beside them with 3 armed men. 2 federal agents stood farther back. And near the authentication terminal was Elias Vane. Eli stopped. "You're all here." Rossi smiled. "Because you finally are." Vane looked older than the photograph, a scar running from his temple into his hairline. His eyes stayed on Eli. "Come with me. You don't have to open anything." Rossi laughed. "There it is. The heroic kidnapping." "Shut up. You'll hide him again," Rossi said. "He'll spend another 6 years waiting for you to decide when he's safe enough to live." Eli's jaw tightened. One of the federal agents raised a tablet. "Mr. Mercer, authenticate the archive and you enter federal protection immediately." "Your task force tried to seize him an hour ago," Adrian said. "And somebody inside it handed my men to Rossi." The agent's expression didn't change. "Those allegations can be investigated after you have what you want," Eli said. Silence. For the first time, everyone looked at him instead of speaking around him. Eli walked toward the terminal. Adrian did not stop him. Rossi's men raised their weapons. Adrian's hand moved toward his own gun, but Eli looked back once. "Don't." Adrian let his hand fall. That changed the room. Rossi frowned. Vane took a step forward. "Eli, listen to me. If you authenticate that archive, there is no hiding you again. I know. They'll come after you. I know. Then come with me." Eli looked at the man who had once carried him through smoke and then spent 6 years believing survival justified ownership. "You saved my life." Vane's face softened. "Yes. That doesn't mean you get the rest of it." Vane stopped. Eli faced the terminal. A biometric reader glowed beside an old microphone. Rossi moved closer. "Authenticate the private transfer key first." Eli looked at him. "Why?" "Because that releases the archive to my server." There it was. Rossi had never wanted the truth exposed. He wanted possession of it. Evidence against judges, syndicates, officials, businesses. Enough blackmail to reshape the city. "And my men?" Adrian asked. "Walk free when the transfer finishes." Rossi smiled at Eli. "You save them. Vale keeps his empire. Everyone wins." Eli looked at Adrian. This was the moment his wound had always predicted. His knowledge had become valuable. Lives depended on it. Powerful men had arranged the room, so his usefulness would decide where he belonged. Adrian could end everything with one command. Instead, he stepped away from the terminal. His decision. Rossi's smile vanished. "You're willing to lose your men over principle." "No," Adrian said. "I'm willing to fight for them. I'm not willing to spend him." One of Rossi's gunmen pressed his weapon against the back of Adrian's captive lieutenant. Eli looked at the vault, then at the authentication screen. Mara wrote that if I verified the original record, it became public. Vane's eyes widened. "Eli, not Rossi's transfer key." Eli said. The original record. He finally understood the distinction. Mara had built the system so no protector, criminal, or government agency could own the evidence if Eli chose to release it himself. Rossi lunged for the terminal. Eli moved first. He pressed his thumb to the biometric reader. The screen flashed, identity match. A voice prompt appeared. Rossi grabbed Eli's shoulder. Adrian hit him before he could pull Eli away. The room exploded into motion. Mason's team cut the lights from above. Adrian drove Rossi into the concrete, while Vane knocked one federal agent's weapon aside. Gunfire cracked once, then stopped when the emergency lights came on. But Eli never left the terminal. He leaned toward the microphone and spoke the authentication phrase that returned to him from 6 years ago. Original record. Full verification. No private transfer. The terminal asked for confirmation. Everyone shouted at once. Rossi ordered him to stop. The federal agent demanded custody of the archive. Vane told Eli he could still walk away. Adrian said nothing. Eli looked at him. Adrian was bleeding from his mouth, holding Rossi against the floor, but he did not tell Eli what to do. So Eli made the choice no one had allowed him to make 6 years earlier. Confirm. The archive opened. Not to Rossi. Not to the task force. Not to Adrian. The system transmitted authenticated copies to the sealed public recipients Mara had created years ago: courts, journalists, independent prosecutors, oversight offices. Mason's phone began vibrating upstairs. Then Adrian's. Then every federal device in the room. The evidence was out. Rossi went still beneath Adrian's grip. His leverage had vanished in seconds. Killing Eli could no longer bury the archive. Capturing him could no longer make the evidence private. The task force could not quietly seize what thousands of people could now copy. Eli had made himself useless as property by making the truth impossible to own. One of Rossi's men lowered his weapon first, then another. The federal agents stepped back when their phones began filling with calls. Vane stared at Eli across the vault. You can't disappear now. Eli's breathing was unsteady, but his voice wasn't. I'm done disappearing. Adrian released Rossi only when Mason's team secured the room and freed the 2 prisoners. The central fight was over. The network had lost control of its secret, and every faction had lost control of Eli. But when Adrian approached him, Eli still had the sedan keys in his hand. Adrian stopped several feet away. He did not reach for them. He did not tell Eli where they were going next. The vault door stood open behind him, and for the first time since the warehouse, there was nothing left forcing Eli to stay beside Adrian except whatever he chose after the danger was gone. By sunrise, Eli Mercer belonged to no one. The archive had been public for 23 minutes when the first federal supervisor ordered the Baltimore team to stand down. Within another 10, the compromised agents inside the clinic were separated from their weapons and detained by officers who had arrived with cameras running. Carlo Rossi left in restraints, shouting about lawyers while his own men refused to die protecting evidence the entire country could now access. Adrian's 2 captured men walked out alive. Mason confirmed Pier 9 was secure, the remaining threats against Adrian's businesses had stopped, and the accounts used to pressure him were already being traced through the records Eli had released. None of it mattered to Eli as much as the open door at the end of the corridor. He stood beside the terminal, staring at it. No guard blocked the way. No one held his wrist. The sedan keys were still in his palm. Adrian stayed several feet behind him. It's over, Mason said quietly. Eli looked at the terminal where his identity still glowed on the screen. Eli Mercer. Verified. For 6 years, being identified had meant danger. Being useful had meant becoming property. Now his name had authenticated something no faction could take back. The same thing that had made him valuable had finally made him impossible to own. Not completely, Eli said. Vane was waiting near the stairwell. He had surrendered his weapon and made no attempt to leave. When Eli approached, the older man looked at him the way someone looked at a person returned from the dead. Mara was right, Vane said. About you? Eli asked. Vane nodded. About me. I kept telling myself that if you survived, the method didn't matter. Eli glanced toward the open vault. You did save me. And then I tried to decide what your life should look like afterward. Vane swallowed. I'm sorry. Eli did not rush to forgive him. That mattered too. Why did Mara keep the files? He asked. Because disappearing was supposed to be temporary, Vane said. She wanted you to have a choice when you were old enough and safe enough to make one. I wanted to keep you hidden forever. And the clinic? Burned by men trying to destroy the archive. Mara got the last surviving index out before she died. Eli's eyes lowered. That closed the last part of the question he had carried since seeing her scratched-out face. She had not erased him because he was shameful or disposable. She had erased him to buy him time. Vane stepped aside from the stairwell. I won't follow you. Eli looked at him. Good. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't hatred either. It was a boundary, and for once no one argued with it. Outside, morning light had reached the broken windows of the clinic. Adrian stood beside the sedan. He had blood dried at the corner of his mouth and a cut across one hand. When Eli approached, Adrian held out nothing. No contract. No phone. No instructions. Mason put cash in the glove compartment, Adrian said. Enough to get wherever you want to go. Eli looked at the car. And if I leave? You leave. No one follows me. No, you won't have someone watch from a distance because you think that doesn't count. Adrian almost smiled. No, Eli searched his face for the hidden condition. He had spent years learning to find those. Protection in exchange for obedience. Safety in exchange for silence. Survival in exchange for usefulness. What do I owe you, he asked. Adrian's answer came immediately. Nothing. Eli looked away because that word hurt more than he expected. Nothing. No debt to repay for the warehouse. No loyalty owed for Baltimore. No requirement that he stay because Adrian had fought for him. Adrian had finally done what every other protector had failed to do. He had made himself unnecessary. Back at the warehouse, Eli said, You told them to keep me alive. I remember. Why? Adrian considered the question. You were waiting for me to decide whether you deserved to live. Eli's fingers tightened around the keys. And I realized someone had probably been deciding things for you for a long time. Adrian glanced at the car. I still didn't understand how much. Eli gave him a tired look. You locked me upstairs. I did. You tried to choose where I went. I did that too. You were bad at the whole freedom thing. This time Adrian actually smiled. I'm learning. Eli felt something unfamiliar move through him. Not safety exactly. Safety had always been something other people promised before closing a door. This was different. Space. Adrian stepped back from the sedan. Go wherever you want, Eli. Then he turned and walked toward Mason without waiting to see what Eli chose. That was the proof, not the words. Adrian was willing to let him disappear. Eli opened the driver's door. He sat behind the wheel and started the engine. No one moved to stop him. He could drive west. Change his name again. Find another room where nobody knew what he could verify. The old instinct told him that was survival. He put the car in gear. Adrian did not turn around. Eli drove past him, reached the end of the clinic lot, and stopped beside the open gate. For several seconds, he listened to the engine idle. Then he looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. 6 years of making himself smaller had kept him alive. Silence had kept people from learning what he knew. Distance had kept anyone from getting close enough to decide he belonged to them. But the archive was public now. There was nothing left to hide by disappearing. More importantly, Adrian had known exactly what Eli was worth when it mattered most, and had chosen not to spend him. Eli shifted into reverse. Mason noticed first. Adrian turned as the sedan rolled back across the lot. Eli stopped beside him and lowered the window. Get in. Adrian stared at him. You sure? You ask that a lot now. I'm practicing. Eli glanced toward the passenger door. I'm not going back to a safe house. Fine. I choose where we go. Fine. And if I want to leave tomorrow? Adrian met his eyes. The door stays open. Eli unlocked the passenger side. Adrian got in. Months later, that promise still held. Investigations spread across 3 states. The authenticated archive destroyed careers, exposed the laundering network, and dismantled what remained of Rossi's protection. Vane testified voluntarily. Adrian rebuilt Pier 9 without asking Eli to become part of his organization. Eli testified when he chose, refused when he didn't, and eventually stopped changing his surname every time someone learned it. What grew between him and Adrian happened slowly, without a bargain attached to it. The first time Adrian kissed him, he asked. The first time Eli stayed the night, the bedroom door remained unlocked. Sometimes Eli still woke before dawn and checked the exits without thinking. Adrian never mocked him for it. He never blocked the door either. One quiet morning, Eli found Adrian in the kitchen while rain tapped against the windows. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. Once, silence had been Eli's way of disappearing. Now Adrian placed a cup of coffee beside him and returned to what he was doing without demanding conversation, explanation, or anything in return. Eli looked toward the front door. It stood slightly open to the cool morning air. He could close it. He could walk through it. He could stay. Adrian glanced over. "You cold?" Eli shook his head. Then he reached across the counter and took Adrian's hand because he wanted to. The first night they met, Adrian had spared his life and locked the door. Now the door was open. The silence was peaceful, and Eli stayed because the choice was finally his.